Hey folks, it's Craig here again with the Valustra Research Alliance. Thank you for tuning in to video number 4 in the Getting Started series with Valustra. In the last episode, we took a look at our fictitious organization that we've been starting to work through called Bakers Unlimited Limited. And if you remember, we had looked at the teams that exist in that organization. We'd looked at their structure by looking at their support network. And we've been able to view the team topology to see what teams we actually have in that org. So let's dive back in. We're going back into the Valustra app. I'm back here on my home screen. I'm going to choose the Bakers Unlimited project to get back in there. And here we go. Here's the project, as you remember, with the support network already all set up. And the team topology has now been identified, so we know which teams are which in terms of their type. But we haven't yet set the interaction pattern that's being used by each of these teams. So we need to should really set that up, make sure that we've got that aligned with their particular team type perhaps. Now again, we might decide that perhaps for some of these teams they're not going to use their predominant interaction style. Perhaps they're going to choose to use a different interaction style. And we can set that up if we want to. But for now, let's just kind of mark these out using their predominant style. Now, I want to introduce a new feature in Valustra here that can help us with this. If you notice in the top right-hand corner of the app, there's this little robot symbol. We actually have an AI built into Valustra that can help us when we're asking questions about this team topology structure, about this value stream reference architecture. So for example, if I wanted to know what are the interaction modes that each one of these teams are or should be using, I can ask Valustra that question. So I'm going to do this I'm using a Windows machine here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the Win H button, which will pick up this little microphone for me. You can see it's actually typing in already to the Valustra interface. So I'm going to stop that because I don't want it to copy all that in just yet. But I'm going to ask Valustra through this interface some questions about this team topology and see what it comes up with. So let me start. For the teams in this organization, what are the predominant interaction modes that they should be using? Question mark. I'm going to submit that question to Valustra. Let's see what it says. So you can see it's come back with an answer. Based on the VSRA methodology, interaction mode should align with the team's projected type to improve predicted fine values. For Bakers Unlimited Limited, the predominant interaction modes that should be used are platform teams, DevOps engineering, quality assurance as a service. Complicated subsystem teams, bakery development, finance support, database, product catalog dev should be using collaboration. Enabling teams, cybersecurity, infrastructure should be using facilitation. And the stream-aligned teams, storefront development, stream-aligned teams do not have a dedicated interaction mode. They are the recipients of interactions from other teams. The projected combination for storefront development indicates it will experience a mix of these interactions. Ensuring that the actual interactions align with these projected modes will help optimize the predicted flow and reduce impediments across the organization. So thank you, Valustra. So let's go back to our organization tab, and you see this chat is available across all of these tabs. So when I move across tabs, it's still there. So let's get these set. So DevOps engineering and quality assurance should be using as a service. So here's quality assurance. Let's set that as a service. Oh, and here's DevOps engineering right at the top. We'll set that as a service. Complicated subsystem teams, bakery development, finance support, database and product catalog dev should be using collaboration. So bakery development should be using collaboration, and finance support should be using collaboration. Here, collaboration. And the database team should be using collaboration. Scroll down so I can do this. Database collaboration, there we go. Product catalog dev, another team that should be using collaboration. So let's set them to collaboration. There we go. We've set all the complicated subsystem teams. Enabling teams are cybersecurity and infrastructure. So they should use facilitation. There's cybersecurity. And infrastructure should be using facilitation. So there we go. So now I've set all of my teams and their interaction mode. The only one I haven't set is storefront development. Remember, that's because it's a stream-aligned team. And as Valustra said, it's going to use the interaction modes from all of the other teams. So now we've correctly set our interaction modes, we can go back to the topology insights. And again, we can click this little interactions button and we can see that we've got all of these modes set correctly. Facilitation, collaboration, and as a service. So now we can start to reason about what this actually means in terms of the flow through our organization. And Valustra AI is very good at understanding how those patterns happen in our organization and where that flow might be held up. So we can ask it questions simply like this. What teams are likely to be the biggest bottleneck in this organization? It's thinking about my question. It's going to come back with an answer in a moment. Here we go. Came out with a response. So let's see what it says. Based on the recent analysis of your organization's topology, the teams most likely to be bottlenecks are infrastructure and cybersecurity, which is really interesting because they're both enabling teams. But if we look at the values that Valustra is providing to us through the analysis, we can see that it has identified that the FINE values, remember FINE stands for flow, impediments, need, and effort, show that the impediments for these teams are the highest amongst all the other teams. Now, why is that? Remember, we're using the value stream reference architecture analysis to look at the various teams that are in this team topology. And when we do that, what we're actually doing is using graph theory to understand the structure and the organization of the teams, and particularly using graph centralities to look for particular values that help us to identify where things like bottlenecks and flow will occur in this organization. And the impediments is a calculation that is made using a centrality called PageRank. And what that's telling us is that these two teams are probably the two most important teams in the organizational structure. Now, what does that mean to be like the most important teams? Well, that means that everybody really depends on them. Everybody is looking to those teams to get help. And if that team is spread too thinly, if those teams are spread too thinly, or those teams can't do what they should be able to do, then they're going to become a bottleneck. And often we find that in real organizations, and it doesn't matter how good those individual teams are or how much resource we throw at them. When they're central to everything, they just become a bottleneck. Now, of course, if they're doing a great job, and hopefully they're using the right interaction style, then they can also improve flow and they can amplify things in the organization. So we have to kind of consider that in both cases. But what does Valustra tell us about this? Is that these teams, both identified as enabling types, show structural characteristics that could severely hinder the flow of work for the teams that depend on them. Remember, it says could severely. It doesn't mean they would, but they could. Notably, for both infrastructure and cybersecurity, aligning their interaction mode to facilitation in the recent update decreased their predicted flow, which is interesting, right? This indicates that while interaction mode is now aligned with their team type, the underlying structural issues likely related to the volume or complexity of what they are able to facilitate for other teams are still a significant challenge. So this is where we can really start to play with the team organization structure here in Valustra by trying out some different patterns. Maybe we go and say, well, what if we changed infrastructure and cybersecurity to use as a service instead of facilitation? What would that do to how they're working in the organization? So we can play around with all these different combinations of team type and interactions to see how flow will be affected when we do that. So that's kind of giving you a taste for how we can start to really sort of dive into understanding our organization here. On other videos, we'll start to change the structure of our team. We'll change some of those supporting relationships and see what that does to the organization. And again, we can ask Valustra to reason about those changes for us and to give us some recommendations of what it thinks we should be doing. So there you go. Really quite cool and quite interesting. Tune into the next video because we're going to keep diving into Bakers Unlimited and helping them to improve flow and making them the best baked goods business on the East Coast of America. So until next time, thanks for tuning in, guys. See you again.